A second?
I'll second.
Okay,
Does anybody agree?
everybody agrees.
There we go. Thanks, Steve. Okay, all in favor of this being the final agenda? Okay, so I'd like to ask for a public comment and limit them to 3 minutes. And please raise your hand or in the chat box, let us know that you want to have something to say. So is there anyone who would like to have something to say?
Jay, this item is for public comment for what is not on the agenda. So
Correct.
anything additional.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any. So let's,
Wait, there's something in chat. John would like to speak. I don't know who that is.
Hi, folks. I'm John from Fallen Leaf Way. Can you hear me?
John, what is your last name, John?
Ewing, E-W-I-N-G.
Oh, thank you. That'll be in the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, you're so welcome. I spoke with Matt today and I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention my concern about getting some striping done in the park. Most of the stop signs on the street level have no viewable markings. So Matt said there might be some ability to take some funds from another part of the budget and kind of address this issue. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think it also would dress up the park a little bit since other areas of Novato seem to have the proper striping everywhere. So thank you very much. And that's my voiceover today.
Thank you, John.
so any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to reports. The PAC election committee, Carol Joy Harris and John Hanson, have a report.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, there's been one, let's see how to put this. Officially, there are 2 openings on the PAC board, and there have been 2 applicants to fill those positions. The application period is over, so that means that what we have is, we call it a white ballot, which means we do not have to go through the election process. And so that those 2 applicants then will automatically take their seats on the board on our annual meeting on June 3.
Who are they?
That's Steve Ploker and Joan Cervici.
See, look here, see up there.
Thank you, John.
I don't
Any
know.
comments from the board or?
Yes, just to clarify, Stephen Ploker's seat was up for reelection. Or Steve was up for reelection and he chose to run again. The other seat was Vicky's, who chose not to run again. So Joan Cervici would fill that fifth seat. And at the, I will also add that at the June 3rd election meeting, PAC meeting, it's the general meeting of everyone in the park. By virtue of being a resident in the park, you are a member of PAC. This is the PAC board that is the 5-seat, 5-member board. So everyone is invited to the June 3rd meeting. At that meeting, all we do is seat the new board. So we know that it's going to be Stephen and Joan Cervici in addition to the other 3, Jay, John, and me. Also at that meeting, the board members vote on who we want to be the officers for the following term. So that's all that happens at that meeting and everybody is invited.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's move on to the second one, to receive report from MVMCC's Finance Committee, including the debt service coverage ratio. Steve Plocher. Steve?
Well, I generally do that at the beginning of the month, and I'll do it again in June when we have our actual June meeting. I think it's after the annual meeting. So I have nothing to say about that at the moment. Oh, I do have a comment though, actually. I have received the April financials from Matt. And the DSCR is getting better. In fact, if the city would just make those adjustments to capital that we have been discussing, the fire abatement and half the whole fire abatement budget and half the trees budget, we would be very close to 2.0. So
I calculated 1.9.
Yeah.
So
Steve, one comment. You've been telling us all year long about how the prepayment of all of the cost of servicing the sewer has affected the DSCR. And basically looking at it this afternoon, we are accumulating basically as revenue the amount that we collect from the residents every month that has been prepaid. So effectively, we are getting something like, I think it's $28,000 a month, if not more, each month. That is basically revenue since we've already put it out. So by the end of the accounting period, we are going to be getting not only the monthly rent that is paid as income, but also the money that we're getting from the sewer. And I think, like John Hanson just said, we're going to be pretty close to 2, if not better than 2, if they make those adjustments to the capital and to just the realization that each month we, in fact, improve our DSCR because we prepaid so many of the expenses. Would you agree to that?
I'm not really sure what you're saying. So I can't say I'll agree to that, but the residents pay for electricity, gas, and sewer all year long, monthly. And that's always part of the DSCR calculation. So there's nothing new there.
I would like to say that was a question.
Cal Joy, hold on for 1 second. So, I mean, basically, we've prepaid all that sewer. In other words, at the beginning of the year, we paid out something like $900,000 to Los
It's
Colinas. And
It's about 325 a year. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so we get from the residents every month X amount. So we don't have to pay that out in sewer. That basically becomes income that we can use against the debt service ratio.
Excuse me, I need to say there are some questions in chat that I think we need to answer. And that is, people need to know what DSCR is and what 2.0 is. Steve, I think you would be best to address that.
DSCR stands for Debt Service Coverage Ratio. And this is because of our loan agreement with Bank of Marin. However, those words or those letters are not anywhere in the loan agreement. The loan agreement simply says we have to have revenue equal to 200% of the debt payment annually. Now that's another way of saying we have to have a DSCR of 2. So our net profit has to be, so our annual debt service is about $651,000. So our net profit at the end of the year needs to be 1.3 million before debt service. That's not included in the expenses. So that's what DSCR means. And that's where the 2.0 comes from. It's got to be twice as much. Our profit has to be twice as much as the debt service. And the bank only cares at the end of the year. We talk about it all year long monthly, but the bank doesn't care about that. They just want to see it at the end of the year, audited financial statements.
And I will add that the reason that this is so important to us at this moment is that at the last 2 city council meetings, that number has been kind of weaponized, if you will, against us. And we have been characterized as operating in the red, which is not true. So I think that's why that is such a hot issue right now.
Yeah, I could talk for an hour about all that, but it gets a little complicated.
Okay, well then let me ask this, because this is quite important to this discussion, I think. The next thing, Steve, I understand that there is an upcoming meeting between you and Chris Blunk, who is our liaison with the city. And for those of you who don't know, he is the director of public works for Novato. He's an engineer, but he is our liaison. So that's why we deal with Chris Blunk. So there's an upcoming meeting, and I believe Jay will be involved in that. And my question is, when?
Looks like May 30th.
Great.
Chris is busy the rest of this week. I'm gone the next week. And so after the Memorial Day holiday, we will meet.
And further to explain to all the residents who are on the call, and by the way, thank you so much for all this participation. It's great. That meeting, it is hoped from our end being PAC and the residents, that meeting will help clarify and maybe get the city to see the way the DSCR is calculated in the way that we believe it should be calculated, rather than the way they're doing it right now. Is that correct, Steve?
No, we're in agreement with the way they calculate it.
Oh,
That was true. That was true a few years ago when the management company was calculating the DSCR, but Chris Blunk knows how to calculate it now.
Okay, but what is in contention, if you will, is the difference between what you think should be categorized as capital expenses that they have categorized as operating expenses, which has made our DSCR less than 2, correct?
That is an item. Yes, that's the thing I kind of started my talk with. Yeah. Where I said it could, if they fix that, we would be getting close to 2.0.
Okay, so that should make this discussion clear to everybody, I hope.
Yeah. And there's a number of points that we have to take up with the city, probably at least a dozen. Some of them are incorrect entries on the proposed budget. Some of them are more theoretical regarding the future infrastructure projects and elements of that. So we have some questions and we have some issues.
Are there any other questions from the board? Residents, do you have any further questions as to Steve's report?
I could add a little more to if that might help people as we head farther into this meeting. We had a healthy DSCR for many years. That's why I stood up in front of the board and argued against rent increases. But if you recall, back then I would say, we acknowledge that expenses are going up all the time and there will come a time when rent increases will be necessary. I didn't argue against it every year. That was 6 years ago. Since that time, expenses have gone up quite steadily. And in the last three to 4 years, we have added new expenses in the form of fire abatement and hillside tree trimming. So notwithstanding what's going to be happening in the future, those specific items are going to be handled differently in the future and will be off our budget. But everything up until this year has been increasing. Let me share with you for a moment. I looked at the 6/30/18 total expenses, 2,320,000. Budgeted and likely actual total expenses for 6/30/23, 3.528 million. So we went from 2.3 million to 3.5 million. During that time, there was no rent increase. So you can see that that is an unsustainable situation.
Uh,
Go ahead, John.
yeah, Steve, yeah, it's not sustainable under a given circumstances. I totally agree with that. But I guess what I would like to see is those circumstances be modified rather than just throwing money at it by increasing the rent until it happens to meet. One of those things would be to change that, what you just mentioned about the tree trimming work. That's $150,000 budget item. It was unfortunately, I think erroneously, put into a maintenance budget where it's treatment of land that has never been treated before. It's kind of like putting in a road on new property. You put in the road, it's capital on new property. And what we did on the hillside is did an initial treatment that will be maintained in the future, but that initial treatment is capital, you know, from any way you look at it, except the way the city looks at it.
And John, let me just add to that, the work that was done in part was on land that had been recently acquired by the city and Marin Valley Mobile Country Club in terms of the TPL land, the 92 acres that surrounded the park. And the fire department recommended in Marin that we treat that area to prevent the fires creeping over the hillside and then getting down into our community, so that clearly it was something that needed to be done, and we took that action. Whether it is treated as maintenance and out of our operating budget or out of capital and paid out of our expenses, we're still going to pay for it. There's no question about that. But to use it as a lever to say that we're not meeting our DSCR because of that expense is the point that Steve and I would like to continue to argue with the city.
Yes, there's that. And then the one other, I think, major point that needs to be negotiated is the multi-year accounting that they threw at us. What was that? I forgot what the number was, 200 and something thousand, $237,000 for owner expenses.
Those do not get included in the DSCR calculation. The bank loan specifically says that a maximum of 25,000 of owner expense can be included in the calculation. So whether those expenses are erroneous or should be capitalized or whatever really won't affect the DSCR.
Okay, let's move on, unless there's some other further comment for this.
I can't see where you were. Raise your hand. I don't see.
Yeah, I saw your hand up, David. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So, first of all, I remember one of the tricks they liked to pull back when I was looking at the books 8 years ago was with these capital expenditures, capital projects, and they would book more capital projects in the budget than they could possibly get done in that year. Instead of carrying in the money not spent on the same capital projects that they listed again the following year, they put in new money. So of course that was money that went into revenue, but it also affects the DSCR. I don't know if they're still pulling those tricks with not carrying money in if they're not finishing or even starting capital projects. I looked at that budget that you folks sent out and it said actual, and I couldn't remember the fiscal year ends April 30th, or is it May or June?
June
June.
30.
June 30th. So the actual in that budget was only for 10 months. Is that
Well,
correct?
it was supposed to say actual projected.
Projected. So okay. They took the actual. All right. So that makes more sense.
The first one did say projected. They dropped that word on the second one.
So it's still what bothers me doing this for a living is that the actuals were used to project in the next year without inflation. And now inflation is high right now. It's not like 1%. And yet what you're saying is that explicitly, not implicitly, but explicitly saying we are going to reduce the services we provide, the materials we could buy in the next year by what the costs go up via inflation. To use the same number that was for 22 to 23 and 23 to 24 just doesn't make sense based on the inflation. If the city had gone in and put in inflation on all the line items, they could have justified $50,000 to $60,000 of the rent increase, and they would have been justifiable. Nobody can argue with taking inflation over the actuals from the previous year.
I need to throw in something here again, please, if you will. And that is the other really large reason for us asking for all this resident input, and again, thank you all so much, is that at the city council meeting last week, the city council voted 5-0 for a rent increase for Marin Valley residents of 5% on July 1st.
So that's a
That
done
is
deal.
that
That's
is a done deal. That is a done deal. There is no, oh, we've got to fight this. No, they voted for it.
Well,
I
I'm
will
glad you
say,
said that.
I want to add, the proposal that was given to them at that meeting by Chris Blunk was a 5.7% increase on July 1st and an additional 5% increase on January 1st of 2024. So that would be almost an 11% increase for every resident here across the board.
So
That
Carol,
is-
hang on.
Thank you.
What you're saying is that the city only voted for the first one and not the second one. I just want to be clear what
Correct.
you said.
And also there was a second part to that motion. And again, 5-0. And that was that the budget that was proposed and passed, approved by PAC at our meeting. So the next step was for it to go to the city, for the city council to pass it. And they didn't. They voted for the 5% rent increase, and also they directed Chris Blunk to go back and work with Matt, Jay, Steve, whoever else, and come up with a budget that reduces expenses in the amount that will allow for the DSCR to become 2.0.
So to reduce the expenses so that the second 5% increase is not needed, but still keeping the DSCR at 2. That's what you're saying.
The second rent increase is not happening. That's not happening. The 5% is.
Okay. So the first one
And the
is.
second part of the motion was to go back and reduce expenses to the extent that the DSCR will be 2.0. That is why it's so important for us, meaning Steve, whoever is Jay, whoever is representing us, to get the budget right and the 2.0.
Excuse me, can I step in here, please?
You're the president.
I'm trying to be. So before that vote was taken, the city manager said very clearly, if you listen to the video of it, you are not voting on the budget. You are not voting for a rent increase. You are voting to send back Chris to recalculate his proposed budget with a 5% tax or rent increase, and to reduce expenses, and to bring that budget back for the city council to vote on whether to adopt it or not. So there has not been an approved rent increase as of this moment.
I think you're wrong.
I appreciate you were there. I would
was
also
there.
say you ought to listen to the recording, the video of it, which I listened to 3 times just to make sure that what I said is correct. He
Yeah,
said
but what-
very clearly that you're not voting on the budget. You're voting to send back Chris to look at what happens if you just make 5% this for rent increase.
Right, okay, what Adam McGill said is different from what the city council voted on. And they voted on a 5% rent increase. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I heard it. I was there. There were only 2 people there from the park, Bill and me.
Listen to it again, Carol Joy.
Okay,
It's factual. It's
Okay.
factual.
all right.
Dave, do you have anything else?
Oh, I'm really glad that Carol Joy, you said what you said, because I didn't know that's what the meeting is strictly about, the DSCR. It sounds like
It isn't.
not about fighting the rent increase. Is that not? I'm confused. Maybe I'm having senior moments, but I'm confused.
Okay, thank you. Let me just recapitulate. What factually happened was that Chris normally would review the budget before presenting it for approval to the city council with the PAC. That has not happened, and they're scrambling now to have that meeting, which is going to happen on the 30th. At that meeting, Steve and myself have a chance to go over the budget and to hear their explanations of why they want to do whatever. And we put out our arguments in opposition, perhaps. And then that budget is given to the city council, and they talk about it and then approve it, including any rent increases or any capital expenditures, so on and so forth. So that hasn't happened. It was taken out of sequence because what he did is he brought his proposed budget without having that conversation with us and presented it to the city council. The city council did not vote on approving that budget. They voted on sending it back with him to reconfigure to see if he could bring the DSCR to 2. So we're going to have that meeting on the 30th and hopefully resolve some of these instances. But that's why we have this tempest in the teapot where half of the people or 90% of the people think they've already voted a rent increase. And in actuality, it hasn't happened, but it very well may. But we're still in the process of negotiating this.
Jay, I have to go, but I just want to say, if you want to use me as a make-believe city person and present your arguments, and for me to kind of hear them and play the city guy, I'm open to doing that. I just can't do it till the weekend or next week, but I offer that to you.
Yeah, you can give me a call and we can meet over the weekend anytime.
Okay,
Be happy
very
to.
All right, take care.
Ray, you have something?
Thanks, David.
Ray, unmute yourself. You're on mute. You're muted, Ray. Unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, are we under rent control? Are still under rent control?
Yes.
What is the maximum percentage that the rent control allows the rents to be increased?
It can be raised as much as the CPI from the previous year.
Oh my, okay, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Jay,
But
actually,
it's under 5% though, right? Is that what you're going to say, John?
it's got to be 5% or less, and it can be the CPI plus 3%. Now, the city has it differently. They say CPI plus 5%, and but it has to be less than 10. So I think the state law will trump the city. Because the state law is far less. In other words, state says they can raise rents up to 5% in any 12-month period. That's what the state law says.
If I could add, just for people's information, we haven't had a rent increase in 7 years. And one of the city council members who knew that, Rachel Farrak, I had gone back before the city council meeting and looked at what the Social Security raises have been in the last 7 years. And in this year it was 8, but she said over the last 7 years, it's been 17%. So I know that the argument that was used several years ago at a city council meeting that was held here in the park against a rent increase was that there was no Social Security rent increase or Social Security payment increase that year. And Pat Eklund said, oh, well, then I'm for no rent increase. And that's what happened. No rent increase, kind of based on that. So I'm just pointing out that knowing that there are a lot of people in this park who rely on Social Security payments totally or partially, that was used as part of the rationale for the rent increase, aside from inflation, our inflation and inflation in general.
Thank you, Carol.
That's something. What about people that are on something called Hello Housing and have a rent like discount already? What's going to happen with that?
Oh, I didn't I had heard at a city council meeting that the Hello Housing program had been discontinued. So I was misinformed. I didn't realize that we had any Hello Housing people who were on that program.
Okay, and they simply just discontinue it if we've been on it for a while? I mean, they can.
No.
We're not on it anymore?
I must have been misinformed, Laura. Sorry. I thought that it was I thought there weren't any people in the park who were on that program.
I don't think I'm the only one. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Okay, well then I don't know the answer.
I think that program is a contract, so it has to be go forward, but as far as any more additions to it, it probably will not. I need to mention here that we are on item C2 at this point, and we're kind of spilling over into item D on the agenda. So I think I would like to move on then to item C3 before we really get into more general discussions on item D. So C3, that's J, just to sort of summarize what we haven't heard already.
Okay, it'll probably be a repeat as well. And basically, again, this tempest has been created by this this movement of the city staff presenting the budget to the city council before they have had a chance to go over it with the PAC. So we are at this point confident that we may have some ability to change what we feel to be some misrepresentations that appear to be given in that that budget to the city council. But we're certainly interested in working on it. So the tempest, we think, may be resolved, but we don't know that for sure. And we wanted to have these meetings, and we wanted to present it to all of the residents because of the fact that the city council had approved sending the budget back to Chris to massage it, to try to figure out how to get it the DSCR to 2. And both Steve and I feel that confidently that we can show that by the end of the year, it's not going to be 1.5. In fact, it may be close to the required amount of 2. And that would take a lot of the leverage off of the city staff wanting to raise rents, but that is yet to be determined. So we wanted to have this meeting to go over that with the residents and to help field any questions from the residents that may have heard differently and need to have factually what actually transpired and how it may affect them. So I would like to move on to a discussion if, since that's part of the next item that we want to cover, unless there's a question about this. So I don't see any questions, so I would ask for any questions from the board or from residents about these issues to come forward, and then we'll try to give you as clear of an explanation as we know as of right now.
So Jay, are you on item D?
No, I moved on, yeah, D1. Discussion.
Okay, I have, to raise your hand to speak, please raise your hand to speak. Go to the reactions. And there is a big problem there with somebody. Oh, I think it's probably here.
Susan, yeah.
There we go. Okay, so anyway, that's where you can raise your hand then, is at the reactions. On the bottom of your screen. But you know, there's, besides what we've come up with, what we've mentioned so far about ways to approach the DSCR for what it needs to be, that's the debt service coverage ratio. Really what that DSCR means is that we need to bring in over twice the amount of money as what we pay out to pay the debt.
Needs to move.
Okay, that's Susan. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So yeah, please don't turn on your microphone until you're called upon, please. And Jay will call upon you. But at any rate, there's one of the major things that I see is one is, gee, we don't need a DSCR. We have more than enough money to pay off the our mortgage, if you will, and still have plenty of reserve left over. So the only reason we need that DSCR is that's in the agreement that we have with the bank to do that. That's a that's how we increase our hedge fund. The other thing, so at any rate, that would be a moot point if we were to pay it off. The other thing is the whole concept of why the city feels that we need to grow a massive reserve. And that is the whole concept of paying it forward. Okay, we are in the process of completing through paying our rents, each of us, everyone in the park and everyone who has been here and still is here, we're paying off a loan. Okay, and by paying off that loan, what we have done is preserve the park for future generations to come in. It's my opinion that those future generations would be the ones that would pay for the benefits that they would receive and not this generation. So paying it forward, for example, if we amassed millions of dollars right now, in 10 years, say for every $1 million we put together right now, in 10 years, that's going to be more like about $500,000 worth. We're burning money by not spending it just because of inflation. The money that we bring in now will be roughly worth half its value in 10 years. So that right there says it doesn't make sense to put away money right now, especially when we get zero interest for it. So that would be, sure, we do need a reserve to cover rainy days or unexpected expenses as they come along, fine. But as far as putting together a massive reserve to pay for millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure improvement someday off over the sunset, I'm not for that myself. So I just wanted to put that out right up front.
Okay, before we move on to Tom and Joan, I just wanted to add a comment. And that is that in managing properties, and this was in the original bond agreement and it taken out in the Bank of Marin loan, you would normally every 5 years look at these issues. In other words, every 5 years, you would look at whether your income is being able to take care of your expenses, and that you would look at the physical plant to see what action had to be taken to maintain your physical plant. What happened in this year's appraisal was the city staff took reports that were updated a few years ago. They're only 2 or 3 years old, and they looked at the need to renew such things as the sewer or the clubhouse or the water. And then they put a dollar figure on it, and they came up with these exaggerated figures that we feel these $30 to $70 million needed in the next 30 years to renew and maintain Marin Valley Mobile Country Club. So what John is saying is that, we have to proportion those needs over the life of the assets. In other words, if you don't need to replace the water system, there's no need to accumulate money for that until the actual need for it. And the way that usually works is that your yearly expense to maintain a facility like the water, if you're only paying out $10,000 or $11,000 a year to fix and maintain that system, why put aside $2 million or $3 million to rip it out and put in a new one? So you normally wait until your expenses get to the point where it makes sense to actually do the renewal. So that analysis was done, and the fact that we haven't had a chance to straighten out some of these items on the budget was part of the reason why we're in we're having this conversation tonight. So anyway, let me go to Tom before we go any further. Tom Whedon.
Hi, thanks. I just have some kind of general questions about the budget line items. And one of the things that was already mentioned was owner expense in relation to part of that expense is not really under operating expenses. It's under cap improvement. Yet the owner expense is sitting there above the line. So are there some owner expenses that are expenses and other owner expense? I don't even know what an owner expense is. So could somebody detail that out?
Owner expenses, if you've got the thing in front of you, owner expenses line 94021.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's the city bills us for administrative expenses. See, we are an enterprise fund. That means that we're not an ordinary rental like you might own out in the world, where you hope to get income from that rental property, net profit, to help you as you retire. You hope it'll be a big chunk of income. The city doesn't get to get income from us. We have to use all of our income to pay all of our expenses, including setting some aside, like Jay was just talking about.
Yeah.
So but since they are the owner, there are a lot of things that they need to watch out for: the administration of the park and the management of the expenses and the income, even though it doesn't flow to them. So they do bill for a lot of financial and administrative work. And it used to be 25,000 a year, and a couple of years ago, they raised it to 50,000. That's what that is.
Okay.
They are
thing.
the legal owner of the park.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I guess that makes sense that that's part of an expense. We're paying out
Yes.
for
Yes,
that.
that's not a capital investment. That's regular operating
Yep.
expense,
Okay.
mostly personnel doing stuff.
Uh-huh. And could you kind of educate me on what the difference is between like the management fee, which is 2 lines above owner expense, and how that relates to the operation and maintenance expenses with, you know, park manager, bookkeeper, maintenance, home rent, travel. What's the management fee that is different than the managers?
That's Helsing.
That we have a management company that runs our park, just like if you were a member of a homeowners association, you would have a management company. They would come to your meetings every month and report on, because they handle the finances. The management company collects the rents. They help write the budget, and through Matt, they manage paying the bills and the money.
So we're paying the management fee, and does Matt work for the management company that we're paying?
Technically, but we pay his salary through the management company. Yeah.
Okay, so we pay for those employees,
No, the management
and
company.
we pay for the management of those employees.
Matt works for us at the park, as do other employees.
Right.
That is separate from the management fee.
But could I clarify? Matt is an employee of the Helsing Group, which
Yes,
is our, okay. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Mark and Greg Pierce are employees of the Helsing Group. So Matt is the supervisor of Mark and Greg, who are also employees of Helsing. PAC, the PAC board, which according to the delegation agreement, basically it gives direction, not basically, we do give direction to Matt as the manager of the park, just like the city council gives direction to city staff.
We also hired the Helsing Group.
Right.
That's a PAC function, is to hire the Helsing Group.
Okay, Tom, I just want to clarify it for you. Now, back in '97, the park was purchased from the previous owner by the city working with the residents by creating a finance company that would manage this asset. At that time, they gave a delegation agreement to the park to hire a management company to oversee and to maintain the park. So we hired somebody, a management team, to manage the park. The city charges us for overseeing ourselves and the management corporation. So that's a totally different function that the city is taking on and charging us for. And they asked us to hire the company that manages, which is the Helsing Group. They prepare the yearly budget. They maintain a staff on here. And the city council, after we've looked at the budget, approves the budget for the coming year. So that's basically where we're at now. Okay,
Jay?
Tom, you still have another question? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
John,
Jay,
go ahead.
yeah, there's a couple of things. One is that Pauline has requested to speak. She has to leave in a few minutes. And the other thing is that Joan is sitting there with her hand raised.
Okay, so let's give deference to Pauline as she wants to say something before she leaves. Go ahead, Pauline.
I'm on Sue Meyer's computer. So I still am not sure if you are having a raise in July of the rents or not, or I have to wait till the end of the month till you have the meeting with the city to find out if it's going to be agreed on?
Thank you for the question, Pauline. Again, the city council has not
I can't
voted on
understand.
a rent increase yet. They have sent back the budget to the city staff to look at what they have to do in order to get the DSCR of 2. And at that point, probably sometime in the end of June or July, it may be, they'll actually pass the budget, and then there may or may not be a rent increase in there.
I doubt that, Jay.
And
Well,
I
I
was
think
there
it's a little
and I,
unfair. So it's
and that's-
unfair to
that's not what
encourage,
happened.
to suggest to the residents that this 5% raise is not coming.
It hasn't been approved yet. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not coming. It hasn't been, it's not approved yet.
That's misleading.
And I think it was. I think they voted for the 5% increase on.
You
June.
heard that already. I don't think we need to get into an
Okay,
argument. for
all
the
right,
next
but
hour.
Jay's saying it's not happening and
Okay, well, anyway, there's other people that need to speak. And we also have a number of questions in the chat that we need to address, but I know Joan has been sitting there for quite a while, so why don't we let Joan speak?
Joan?
Oh, hi. Maybe I shouldn't even ask it at this point because I'm feeling it's a bit contentious, but it sounds like, Steve, based on looking at, we haven't had a rent increase for quite a while. Social Security has gone up significantly over the last 10 years, that a 5% raise to you, should that happen, is somewhat reasonable for the city to ask of us. Am I getting it right from you?
Completely.
Okay.
Francine, you have a question?
Yes, in this year's budget, 2023, has money been allocated for the yearly fire abatement when we bring in the goats? I'm noticing that the grass in the Dry Creek area behind my house and other parts of the park is really a big fire hazard. So can you address that? Is that in there? And will we see
John?
that happen?
I defer that to John Hanson.
Okay, yeah, just very briefly, what's going to be happening there is that the
Greater Novato.
yeah, the Greater Novato shaded fuel break will be starting actually in Marin Valley. And that will be a fuel break, a major project, multi-million-dollar, several years, that will put a fuel break around the entire city of Novato. And that will be beginning on the next fiscal year, starting July 1st. And either before or during that time, we will need to go out and do some preliminary work, some preparatory work for the goats to come in. The plan is right now that we will not need to do any of that work from basically here on. We will have some preparation work, like the first 10 feet out away from houses along the wildland urban interface. We'll need to clear that with weed whackers so that the fence for the goats doesn't have to go all the way up to the resident areas and eat their roses and so forth. So, but at any rate, that's where it stands right now. It is going to be happening, and it is going to be paid for. So the line item in our budget for the fuel break work, for the fire mitigation work, we still need that line item, but not to anywhere near the extent that it is right now. It's at 150,000. We can drop that a bit. We can also drop probably the tree pruning budget a bit as well. So all of that is yet to be seen, exactly what that's going to be, but we should find out in the next few days.
So when would we begin to see the fire abatement with the high weeds and all being chopped down?
We will find out.
It usually happens in May.
We
Last year
will
was
find out in the
early.
next few days.
Few days. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Jay, do you want to address hands up, or do you want to hear some of these questions on the chat?
Let's keep on doing hands up and give everyone who hasn't spoken a chance.
Okay, great. Michelle is next, I think. Or no, Susan, excuse me.
Susan?
I think that was Pauline.
Oh,
Okay, that might
okay.
have been Pauline on Susan's, yeah.
Okay, good. So
Let's hear from Michelle.
Hi, Michelle, 9 Fallen Leaf. I'm just gonna put in the chat here a letter that I sent to the PAC board, so people are kind of aware of some of the thinking that I have, because I won't have time really now to address it all, but I'd really thinking ahead about the City of Novato budget adoption. It was at their May 9th budget workshop where they started to talk about this 5%. And at their June 13th City Council meeting, they will review their initial budget. And so we should all be following what that is. And then on June 27th, they will adopt their budget. And we have a right as individuals or as the PAC to write letters or attend that meeting and speak addressing that budget. I think what I would really like to see, because the direction I see them going in is the 5% rent increase and then disaggregating other costs and expenses and charging it back to us, thereby increasing it greater than 5%. So we're all thinking it's only going to be 5%, but I think it's going to be 5% plus some other charges. And we're starting to see that in this representative budget. And thank you so much for the PAC taking the time to develop this budget of actuals, park proposed, and city recommended. I think it's a good view of the direction that they're starting to go into. What I'd really like to see is even further some thinking about how does this relate to individual sites, like representative sites, like our lowest like income, like I'd like to see like examples of what these costs, the 5% plus the other charges, example charges back to our rents, like 3 different rents or 3 different incomes that we have in the park, and then actually compare it to the housing element, which is saying that we have low income people here. We know we're already at whatever 50%. What does that increase actually mean to somebody's pocketbook? And I think that's the communication partially that we need to give to the city council, to the decision makers, when they ultimately get to that public hearing. They need to be aware that the representative increase in some people's low income status is a higher percent of their income than say somebody making a higher income amount. I was concerned about the staff proposed increase in terms of common area maintenance and tree trimming and road paving and contingency costs being deferred. So I was suggesting that somehow we look at a multi-year budget, like perhaps we could come up with an alternative where we're saying to the city as a trade-off for certain costs, we won't pave this year, but we want to see paving every other year because we don't get the number of vehicle traffics that a city street would have, or some alternative where we're taking a more position of power in our communications with staff. At the meeting that I went to, not the one that Carol was speaking about, I didn't know about the May 9th one, but I went to one for that. I watched it on Zoom, and staff had shown these multiple reports where they were saying, and I think we referred to it, John referred to it, about a variety of improvements that were needed here over time. And this is where the multi-year budget would come in handy, or at least at a minimum, us saying that these are the improvements we think we really need to see within a certain period of time. So that we're clearer about where we want to see the improvements, not necessarily where the city staff does. And I just think maybe re-looking at some of the costs that are in here and what are areas that we can reduce, which is what you're saying you're going to be looking at with staff anyway. And I'm talking about the telephone fee being high, or the costs that we're actually paying to staff, including the deferral of their rent and a cost for improvements of their space, and just management fee showing that it's not going up over time, which I think isn't consistent with kind of the CPI trend. So I just appreciate everybody's time being spent on this topic. Thank you very much.
I need to address that really quickly, Jay. At that city council meeting, Bill, my husband, Bill Davis, and I were the only people there present from the park. And by the way, we were there till midnight, almost midnight. And I spoke for 3 minutes, as did Jay and John, Jay Shelfer and John Hansen by phone. And then since I was there in person, they actually called me back up and were asking questions of me, like, well, would the PAC board do such and such? And I'm saying, hey, I'm only one member of 5. But at any rate, when I spoke my 3 minutes that you get for public comment, I was addressing exactly what you were just saying, Michelle. Chris Blunk was using this figure of this, I saw it as an arbitrary figure of an $80 rent increase. And they were all talking about an $80 rent increase. I think that how he arrived at that figure was taking somehow an average rent here and saying, okay, an average rent is $800 a month. And so they were saying, well, so we're only talking about $80 a month. Okay, well, to the people on the city council, maybe $80 a month isn't a lot. And so they were talking about it as being a 10% increase, because they were talking about a 5.7, again, a 5.7 as of July 1 and another 5% as of January 1. Okay, so they're talking about this $80. So when I got up for my 3 minutes, and my voice was kind of breaking as I was saying this, I was saying, there are people in our park who are very low income, who cannot come to our wonderful monthly events that we have in our clubhouse because they can't afford the $10 for the food. And the people on the city council was sort of shocked. And I said, so, I was talking about the very low income people who this is going to make a huge difference to. And as we all know, so now I'm talking to the people here at this meeting. We all know there are people who pay more than that and people who pay less than that. And I, reminded them of that. And the people who pay more aren't necessarily the people who are higher income. It's just our odd way of doing our rents here. So I definitely made that point, Michelle, that we have very low income people, and that a rent increase means a lot to some of the people who live here, no matter what the rent increase is.
Well, this is exactly why we're having this meeting. It's because the city, they speak to a few of us, but they don't speak to the vast majority of the people in our community. And that's where we wanted to have this meeting, so you people can air your views. What do you think about all of this? They want to raise the rent. They want to raise the rent 5% or 5.7%. They want to raise the rent the maximum that they possibly can. I think that perhaps the rent does need to go up, but why 5.7%? Why not 5.6? And for that, why not 5.2? Why not 4.7? Why pick a number that doesn't really mean anything just because it's a number that's convenient? So what I would like to do is to see exactly what we need to raise the rent to and do it exactly that amount. It's not just pulling some number out of the sky. Please, Laura.
I need more than 1 month's notice about this too. It doesn't sound like they're going to give us much
Yes,
notice.
Laura,
It's going to happen
please.
in July.
Yeah, but Laura's point is good, that they need time to tell us. They can't just spring it right away, but 90 days, 180 days, whatever it is, they need time for us to adjust to a rent increase and prepare ourselves for it. So anyway, there's still a lot to go. So whether there's going to be a rent increase and exactly how much is still in the air. The city has an idea, but that's all they have right now, and they've looked for more information before they figure out exactly what they want to do. So we're going to try to give them that information. Maybe some ideas from today can come from outside the box of just raise rents and throw money at a perceived problem.
Jay,
Laura brought up an interesting point about the notice, and basically the notice that is on the books for both the county and for the state is to give time for people being affected by the rent increase to make their views known. So it gives residents or the people affected by the raise not only time to adjust, but to make comments to whoever is proposing these rate increases. So that is yet to be determined. But Laura, I can guarantee you, we are watching that closely.
Jay, there have been several questions in the chat about the bank loan. When is it due? How much, or when would it be paid off? How much do we still owe? How much do we pay in interest every month or every year? So I would like either you or Steve to give those figures so people know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, Steve, do you want to do that, or do you want me to wing it?
I think it's 2.8 million that we owe by the end of 2024.
Oh, no, I think it's yeah, I think it's
2026.
Yeah, I think that too. And well, while Steven's getting the numbers, I'll say that the last, we were talking about paying off the loan, and we were told by Chris Blunk, this was about 6 months ago, oh, we need to have our finance department, meaning the city's finance department, study this, do a study reserve, and see how much they think is a responsible amount for you, for Marin Valley to have in reserves. And then they never got this, it was dropped. We brought this up at the April meeting, the April City Council meeting, I did, and I brought it up again at this last meeting because we would save in interest and also our principal payment. And here's Steve. You're muted, Steve. You're muted.
Yeah, you're still on mute, Steve. Unmute.
Don't
There you
mute me. Okay, as of the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, we will owe about 2.6 million. We pay 650,000 a year total interest and mortgage, and the loan will be paid off in December of 26.
So if we paid that right now, we would be
We
saving
probably save 1,000 in interest.
a year.
The rest of it, no, the whole period.
Oh,
Because it
total.
goes down as we pay off principal. So the interest will be
Oh,
about
that's right.
70,000 for the coming year, and then it shrinks and shrinks again.
I should mention on that also with paying the loan off that over the years, there's been a diminishing prepayment penalty for paying the loan off early. Up until December of last year, it dropped down to 1%. And as of December 22, going forward, it is now 0. So we have absolutely no penalty for paying it off right now.
And even if we go along with the city's planned large infrastructure projects, none of them start during that period of paying the loan off. So it's not like we need that money for something else.
That's right.
And without paying the loan, we would be putting that 650,000 back into the reserves. for each of those 3 years. So it's almost a wash. You know, by the time we get to that 4 years from now, our reserves will be the same, whether we paid the loan off or not. So why
And
not
we wouldn't
eliminate
have
the
to have
interest?
paid the interest, and we wouldn't
Yeah,
have to
I think with
pay
the-
the
Yeah, we
outstanding.
saved the interest.
Mhm. Jake, somebody has their hand up.
Well, Ray has had his hand up for a while, so I'd like to call on Ray.
One other thing that I think you need to keep in mind is the increase in the cost of utilities in the park. Those folks that are on Social Security, you know, they may have not only a struggle paying rent increase, but they are already, I think, struggling if their increases like mine has been, you know, over the past year for just the utilities, and that needs to be taken into consideration before we are in the discussion of whether or not rent increases are needed.
Thank you, Ray.
Jay, Janet Schuldes has had her hand up as well.
Okay, I would like to speak to Ray's comment really on the utilities, and that's a whole nother consideration, Ray, on the utilities. And you're right, because the city would like to raise our fees on utilities. And I don't know how they can do that legally, quite frankly, but anyway, that's something they would like to do, not only raise rates for rent, but also raise rates for our utilities. One thing to consider there is that we do not pay water. There's no water on our rent check bills that come every month. We pay PG&E and we pay sewer, but we don't pay water. So, and water costs are going up radically. We're going to be charged actually this coming year an additional almost $7 per home on our water bill. So, and we don't pay any water right now. That comes out of the operational budget. The problem is we can't. It would cost us a bloody fortune, $300,000 per home to add meters. You know, that was just ludicrous when I saw that. So it's not going to do anything to meter the water at our homes and pay for it that way. We pretty much have to go along with doing what we're doing. But we do need to contribute, I think, to the water because it's becoming a very substantial expense.
And that's one of the reasons why we should discuss allowing or voting for a rent increase to help cover for some of these expenses that are borne by the overall administration or the running of the park, and including the fact that residents have been getting water basically for free, and it coming out of the rents that are paid and the budget for Marin Valley Mobile Country Club rather than theirs. So, I mean, those are things that we need to, you know, work through. And John's point is very, very true that the cost of metering would way outweigh the cost of revenue coming in if we started to individually request the residents to pay for water. Whereas if we raise the rents 1% or a percent, whatever that is, probably around 2%, that would cover all of the water expenses without having to spend that money of putting in meters and metering it on a monthly basis. But again, this is stuff that will be discussed and worked out in the near future.
To cover 90% of the water bill, which was what we just estimate in our discussions with Matt, is the residential portion. The remaining 10% gets used at the clubhouse and in the common spaces. But that'd be about 95,000, and it would take almost a 4% increase in rent.
Right.
And I think I saw in the paper today that the water department is considering raising the cost of water to individuals by 20% next year.
That's right. It's about $7 a home.
North Marine Water?
Yeah.
Because
Meg,
often
you've
they,
been very patient. I'd like to call on you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Janet.
it's a question. Janet's at my house right now. It's a question, as long as you're on utilities, makes sense to ask this one.
I believe it's good that we raise the rents in order to help with City Novato. If they could do, I've talked to you about this before, Jay, about having a community solar and a water collection system in the park. And maybe some way the City of Novato can help the park do that. Since, I mean, John's got his own solar, and there's a couple other people in the park that have their own solar, so it's probably not that important to those people that have their own solar, but I think it would be beneficial, especially if you guys are worried about water going up. We'd have our own wastewater system. We'd have a solar system, so we wouldn't have to worry about our electric bills.
Right.
So
That's
I
on
know
the table.
people don't really want to hear this. I've talked about it so much before, but I just think it would be important if they do raise the rent, that would be one of the pointers that they could work with.
Yeah, that's been on the table for years. We've talked about it with the city, and we've tried to do various actions along those lines, and we're not going to forget about it. The point, unfortunately, is that because of COVID and the reduced personnel at the city level, and because of their perception of us not
Thanks
meeting
so much,
DSC
Robert. I don't know why that message didn't come through, but that's just fine.
Who's,
Timo, you got to mute.
Okay, so anyway, those issues are certainly on the table, and we're going to be looking at them. The fact of the matter is that the city overviews all of our capital improvements and capital projects, such as putting solar in. So as long as they're so strapped for personnel and the ability to consider and help us on these matters, they've just told us not to even ask, that they don't have the time to actually help us do these things. Michelle Rodriguez sent a number of grant proposals, which I forwarded on to the city, and they came back and they say, we're too busy. We don't have time to deal with this for some future time. So again, these are all things that are on the table. We're trying to resolve them, and we're doing the best we can.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, and thanks, Michelle, for your work looking for those grants. It is a shame to let grant money go by.
Yeah, especially
yeah.
with Biden, we don't know what's going to happen in 2024, and
Yeah, those things could disappear.
yeah. And so having the money, free money now seems really silly.
who is talking?
Janet
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
and
Okay,
Gail.
does anyone else have their hand up?
Not Gail.
No, but there's some, there are some chat questions in here. Let's see if I can find one here.
Oh, somebody is asking a question about infrastructure improvements over the next 10 years. And Michelle Rodriguez spoke to this a little bit in her comments. There is a whole, we want to have more workshops like this. And this really is more a workshop meeting, because the PAC board isn't voting on anything tonight. This is a workshop to get and give information for from everybody. And there are more that are planned, and I hope as many people or more come to those. And that is about the long-term sustainability of the park. And that is what was, there was a stack this big of papers that Chris Blunk gave in in that proposal he made in April. And we need to have everybody in the park talk about the long-term sustainability, which is the infrastructure and the $40 to $70 million that the city thinks that we need over the next 30 years. So that's a whole other set of meetings that we're going to have, workshops that we're going to have in addition to, or besides this one that we're having right now.
Don, is there- go ahead.
Tom Whedon has a chat question pertaining to what you just said, Carol Joy. He says, do we have a proposed capital improvement budget put together that would address timely infrastructure improvements over the next 10 years that would work
Can I
for
answer
us?
that, please? Let me talk about that for a minute, because that, as
Go.
you may guess, that is the elephant in the room. Because when we talk about all these annual budgets and how much is left and where it goes, hopefully large chunks is into the reserves. And now why is that? Because of big projects that may be in our near future or our distant future. So what we need to do to get a better focus on that is to have some meetings with the city. They have had these reserve studies done, and they've laid out this schedule of when the water system needs to be replaced and when the sewer system needs to be replaced, and then the electrical system and the gas, and based on what those things cost and the years that they think they're going to happen, they figure out how much reserves we are going to need to spend that kind of money. Well, where are those reserves going to come from? Incrementally from every year's budget, which means we need a big chunk of profit. Well, how are we going to increase that big chunk of profit? More rent. You can't lower the expenses. So that's what they see for us. Now, so therefore, where we need to start is, well, let's talk about more realistically when those projects might actually get done. You say, replace the water system sooner because 10 years later, it'll cost twice as much. Well, I don't buy a car tomorrow because 10 years from now, it's going to cost twice as much. I wait till my car wears out, and then I'll buy a new car, not based on the future prices of them. So we need to do some wrangling with the city and get realistic about when we might actually be doing these big projects. And if we can come to some agreement on that, that is a little more conservative than the ideas they have in mind, then that backs into how much reserves we need each year, which directs how much profit we need, which comes back to how much rent increases will we need. So it's a big circle, and that's kind of a short summary of it right there.
Yes, and I would like to expand that actually to think of other sources of revenue. Again, I don't like the idea of paying it forward. And there are some things coming up maybe in the next very few years that, yes, we will need to have some money for. But, you know, as far as 10 years down the road, that's another generation. There's nobody in the park here. Very few people, let's say, that are going to be here 10 years from now.
Hey,
Or certainly 15 or 20 years from now. So you're probably going to move. So at any rate, the coming up with the money now and then letting it just kind of almost disintegrate through just sitting around, not getting spent and not getting interest on it. That's called depreciation. And so our $1 million now is going to end up $500,000 10 years from now. That is not a wise investment. That's not a wise strategy for doing what needs to be done. We have to make the best use of the money that we have when we have it in an inflationary environment.
Okay, more comments, more questions.
Yes, when is the next meeting? The next workshop.
I don't think we've set a date for it, but when we do, we'll send it out the same as we sent it out this time.
Okay, good.
It
I
should
mean-
be at least until Jay and I have met with Chris Plunk. After
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
early June.
Yeah, another question here is, can we put some reserves into CDs and get 5%? That would be great. If we own the park, we could invest pretty much however we want. There are some limitations, but we could do some higher interest investments. In fact, we had a very nice one going until the city bought it, and we had to get rid of that investment because the government agencies have very strict limitations on the investments, and higher interest means higher risk when it comes to investments. So no, we cannot do a 5% CD. We have to be limited to what, 0.1% on a bank loan, which is nothing.
Yeah, and with the banking industry under the gun.
Yeah. What bank?
Yeah, what bank are you going to put your money in?
Yeah.
So
Well, we don't really have our money. Our money is just a small part of the vast city sums, and they don't separate out bank accounts for our reserves that we get to have any say about.
Yeah, and I would like to also remind everyone, and then for the new people, we talk about our money, and every time city staff or city council reminds us, it's not our money, it's their money.
It's only
Yeah.
their money because they put it into the same bank account as their money. So
Right.
it's a different line item in their account.
Yeah,
That's why.
and conversely, when people in the park are worried about, and it came up at our last PAC board meeting, someone said, well, is the city wanting to raid our reserves because they're operating in the red? We're not. We have reserves. They're not. They're going through theirs at a rapid rate. And the answer to that is no, they're not. Well, for one thing, they can't.
No,
Well,
technically they
technically they
can,
could.
but it would just ruin our ability to provide for ourselves. So
Right,
they would
right.
make everything they complain about, they would make it much worse by doing
Right.
that.
Yeah, technically they could, but they're not going to. So
No.
Actually, I don't think they can because we are an enterprise account, which means that
It's an accounting concept. It's not a legal definition.
no, but it's you're right. It's not a legal definition, but what it does is supposed to differentiate our funds from theirs so that our money can only go to our expenses, and supposed to isolate it out. It would have been better if it was in a separate account, but they didn't
Well,
want to do it that way.
they've always wanted us to be supporting, and we always have been. So
That's right. And if anybody has a question about the city selling or wanting to sell Marin Valley, anytime it comes up, even obtusely, the city says, no, we're not interested in selling. They don't have any equity in us anyway. All of our, that's where the enterprise comes in, is that all of our funding goes to our expenses and goes to our loan. The city has not contributed a single nickel to our expenses that has not been fully reimbursed.
A couple of us met with Tim O'Connor, councilman, a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that, and he said, oh, no, we would never do that. If we need to cash out some things, we have a number of pieces of real estate in Novato that are vacant and not performing, and we would certainly sell those first. And they don't even want to sell those.
and as a matter of fact, when Bill and I were sitting there watching them go through every single line item of the city's budget before they talked about us at 11 o'clock at night or whatever it was, Tim O'Connor made a motion about them assessing all of their city-owned properties. There are a lot, there are dozens of them, and starting with the ones that are highest dollar value. I mean, that guy's smart, and getting the report on that and seeing what to do about them. And it has nothing to do with us.
Okay, again, more questions?
There's one more, kind of a side question in the chat about, solar, personal solar, programs in the park. And, yeah, it is illegal to have rooftop solar in the park, but it has to do with roof loading. Nobody sells homes down here. Nobody sells homes down here that have a 30-pound per square foot loading. All of those are up in the Sierras, really, because they're more expensive. They're up there for snow loading. Here we have 20-pound roofs and we have 10-pound or 15-pound roofs, and those do not meet the criterion for HCD to allow anything solar panels to go on our roofs. But if it's not on the roof, yeah, there's other options.
Okay, moving forward. Any other questions? There's Lou Judson. We also need to appreciate the city for keeping us out of the profit commercialization of running on mobile home parks. No selling.
No, run-of-the-mill park industry.
Yeah, I think he meant mobile home parks.
Oh, well,
Yeah, you build it up and then you sell it, that sort of thing. But like I said, they don't have any equity.
All right, we will let you know after we meet with the city again on the accounting issues where we stand, and we'll have another meeting. I would like to just move on and say there's no old business, there's no new business. Carol Joy has already given you an explanation of what's going to happen at Marin Valley Mobile Countries Club's annual meeting. And the next announced PAC board meeting is going to be on June 6th at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
and wouldn't it be great if all 50 of these people showed up for that, and they would get all the reports and find out what is happening right now with all these things we're talking about. So everybody,
50 people, wow.
Yeah.
Steve, you want to say something?
Ray
Okay.
has a question.
Who does?
Ray.
Ray. Go ahead, Ray.
My last question is that once this loan is paid off, what is going to happen to the rents? Will the rents in the park then go down because of we will not be paying the principal and the interest?
Down is not a concept when it comes to rent.
I don't think so.
No, we have a lot of things we need to do.
But that's
Nice
where
idea, though.
it would be nice to not raise it any more than we absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to work on.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, 'cause I remember, when Judy Bucci, brought up, that she was paying more rent than her neighbor, and her house wasn't, or the neighbor's house wasn't, as good as hers. And it just occurred to me, that there are people in the park that are paying high rents because their home has been sold, multiple times. And it would be nice to be able to equalize that rent. And that's why I asked the question. But if we're sitting there and we're talking about when the loan is paid off and we are no longer making principal and interest payments, if the rent is not going to be going down because of that, why then that's my that isn't the answer that I'm looking for. Thank you.
No, rent equalization is off the board, quite frankly. It cannot be legally done until the park is sold. So hopefully it will never happen.
Right. That was one of the things too, is that there was no way that you were going to be able to equalize, keep the park income revenue neutral if you lower what the cost of high rent has, because you didn't have to raise the rent, of your lower
Right.
people that
And-
have less rent.
Yeah. And if you will recall that the city staff studied that every which way and said, no, it's not going to happen. And in fact, Pat Eklund talked to me about that the other day during a break at the council meeting, and it's never going to happen.
Correct. I understand. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone call for adjournment?
I
Yeah,
call for
I will
adjournment.
call. Okay, I will second. Let everybody
favor?
get going so they can
second.
go watch the
Thank you,
movie.
Vicky. See you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.